A judge yells at a black boy for speaking out. Then security footage exposes the shocking truth. If you believe every black child deserves a voice, not shame, hit that subscribe button now. 12-year-old Marcus Bell sat stiffly on the wooden bench outside courtroom 3A, the cold varnish beneath him offering little comfort. The long corridor of the Claiborne courthouse buzzed with low voices and the occasional echoing footstep, but Marcus barely noticed. His fingers clung to the sleeves of his oversized navy sweater, twisting the fabric as if it could anchor him in place. Each breath he took felt heavy, like he was pulling in more than just air. He was drawing in fear, uncertainty, and the crushing weight of truth that no one wanted to hear. Beside him, his father, Terrence Bell, stood tall. The deep creases beneath Terrence's eyes betrayed sleepless nights. He kept one hand in his coat pocket, the other gently resting on Marcus's shoulder. Terrence didn't speak. He hadn't for several minutes, but his presence was loud in its own way. Silent, strong, and ready. His jaw was set, and his eyes remained fixed on the courtroom doors as if trying to stare through them. He knew what was waiting on the other side. He had seen enough of this town's justice to understand how quickly things could turn. Marcus was the key witness in a case that had shaken Claiborne's quiet surface. The town, wrapped in brick buildings and traditions that ran deep, liked its comfort zones. And Officer Darren Holt, with his polished badge and well-trimmed beard, had long been one of those comfort zones. Friendly to neighbors, a regular at local diners, always the one to show up at town parades. But none of that erased what happened outside the library 2 weeks ago. Marcus could still feel the sting of the sidewalk on his back, the sudden jolt as Holt had grabbed him and shoved him like a sack of laundry. The books he'd been carrying, ones he'd borrowed to study for his school's history fair, had scattered everywhere. And when Holt yelled at him, accusing him of loitering or worse, Marcus hadn't known what to say. He didn't think he needed to say anything. He was just a kid. But bruises didn't lie, and neither did the tears that wouldn't stop for hours after. Still, many in Claiborne called it a misunderstanding. The local paper wrote a short column, quoting Officer Holt's claim that the boy had appeared aggressive and evasive. There was no follow-up, no apology, just silence until Terrence hired an attorney, then an investigator. Now, all eyes were on Marcus. The courtroom doors creaked open. A bailiff, middle-aged with a salt-and-pepper mustache, stepped halfway out and glanced around. "Marcus Bell," he called. His voice wasn't cruel, but it wasn't kind either. It was protocol. Marcus rose slowly. Terrence gave his shoulder a soft squeeze. "Tell the truth," Terrence said quietly, looking his son in the eye. "That's all you need to do." Marcus nodded. He wanted to be brave. He was brave. But as he stepped into courtroom 3A, he felt the gaze of strangers like heat on his back. The room was smaller than he expected. Rows of wooden benches, a high judge's bench at the front, a flag in the corner, and polished floors that made every footstep feel louder than it should be. He walked past the defense table, past Officer Holt, who didn't even glance at him, and climbed up onto the witness stand. Judge Ronald Marks adjusted his glasses as Marcus settled in. The judge was an older man, bald, with sharp cheekbones and a voice that could cut through stone. He leaned forward, squinting. "State your name," he said curtly. "Marcus Bell," the boy replied, voice barely above a whisper. "Speak clearly, young man, and don't waste the court's time." Marcus swallowed hard. "Marcus Bell," he repeated louder. The courtroom was quiet, but the tension was thick. Terrence sat behind his son, back straight, eyes never leaving the boy. Officer Holt, in uniform, sat calmly beside his lawyer, his face blank. Marcus's hands gripped the edge of the witness stand. "Tell the court what happened on the afternoon in question," the judge ordered. Marcus nodded, steadying his breath. "I left the library with some books. I was walking to the bus stop. Officer Holt came up behind me. I didn't see him at first, he just grabbed me." "Grabbed you?" the judge interrupted. "Why would he do that?" "I don't know," Marcus said. "He pulled me by the collar. I dropped my books. He told me to get against the wall. I tried to explain. That's enough, Judge Marks snapped, slamming his gavel. The sudden crack startled everyone. You're making serious claims without proof, boy. Where are your parents? Who coached you? A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Terrence started to stand, face flushed with anger, but the bailiff held out a hand. Sit down, the judge barked. This is my courtroom, not a rehearsal for some made-up drama. Marcus blinked fast, trying not to cry. I'm just telling the truth, he said, his voice shaking. The truth? Or a story someone told you to say? Judge Marks leaned back, folding his arms. This is exactly why we require real evidence, not just words. The courtroom fell into an awkward hush. Even Officer Holt's attorney shifted in his seat. The bailiff glanced at the clerk, whose eyes darted nervously between the boy and the bench. It wasn't the first time they'd seen the judge cut down a young witness, but it was the first time the witness didn't falter. Marcus sat upright, blinking away tears but not lowering his eyes. The judge exhaled heavily and reached for his pen. I'm striking this from the record, he said, unverified and emotionally charged. At that moment, the door at the back of the courtroom opened. Quietly, no drama, just the soft click of shoes on tile. A man in a dark gray suit entered, holding a leather folder. He walked with quiet purpose, past reporters, past rows of spectators, until he reached the clerk's desk. He said something in a low voice and handed over the folder. The clerk's eyebrows lifted in surprise. She opened the folder, found a USB drive, and stared at it for a second before rising and walking it to the judge. Sir, she said cautiously, we just received new evidence. Footage from the security camera outside Claiborne Library, the day of the incident. The judge frowned. We'll view it later. Proceedings. A voice from the back interrupted him. I think you should view it now, the man in the gray suit said firmly. The defense, and the boy, have a right to the full truth. Heads turned. Some leaned forward. The man stood tall and composed, his tone respectful but unwavering. Malcolm Tiller, he said, introducing himself, independent investigator, hired by Mr. Bell just days ago. For a moment, no one moved. The judge tapped his gavel once, sharply. Sit down, Mr. Tiller. This court will decide what's relevant. But something had shifted. A murmur passed through the gallery. Even the court reporter looked up from her keyboard. The bailiff moved toward the monitor. Judge Marks looked at the USB drive in his hand, his jaw tightening. Malcolm didn't move. He simply met the judge's stare and added, What's on that drive will decide whether this court protects justice or buries it. The air in courtroom 3A was no longer just tense. It was electric, and as the judge gave a reluctant nod, Marcus sat back in his seat, heart pounding, knowing something was finally about to change. Only those who stand for truth and justice will subscribe. Real ones don't stay silent when kids are silenced. The courtroom had never been quieter. As the lights dimmed slightly and the monitor on the far wall buzzed to life, every eye in courtroom 3A turned toward it. The static gave way to a grainy black-and-white image, the front of the Claiborne Public Library, captured from a high corner angle. For a brief second, there was only wind stirring the bushes and a bicycle parked just off frame. Then Marcus appeared, small, his backpack bouncing slightly as he walked with both arms full of books. From his seat near the defense table, Marcus swallowed hard. His heart thudded in his chest. He knew what was coming, but that didn't make it easier to watch. Officer Darren Holt entered the frame like a shadow swallowing light. Tall, square-jawed, uniformed, he moved quickly, too quickly for someone simply looking to ask questions. As Holt approached, the tension in the courtroom thickened. You didn't need sound to understand what was happening. Holt didn't call out to Marcus, didn't tap him gently. He reached forward and seized the boy by the collar, jerking him backward with force. Marcus's legs stumbled as he tried to regain balance, his books crashing to the sidewalk. A low gasp rippled across the room. Holt pointed at him, face twisted with anger. He appeared to yell something, his mouth wide, his brows drawn sharply down. Then came the second shove. Marcus, clearly off balance, fell to the concrete. One shoe skidded off his heel as he hit the ground. From the front row, Terrence Bell gripped the edge of the bench until his knuckles turned white. A muscle jumped in his jaw, but he didn't move. Not yet. The judge's expression had changed. His eyes narrowed, his lips pressed tightly together, the lines on his forehead now deep creases. He shifted in his high-backed leather chair, clearly aware that the moment on screen was undoing everything he had tried to dismiss earlier. His earlier accusation, "Who coached you?" hung in the air like a lie that couldn't find a place to hide. Malcolm Tiller, the independent investigator who had submitted the footage, remained standing. Calm, composed. He had seen the clip a dozen times, but in this room, it meant something more. "There's more," he said quietly, his voice measured as he stepped forward and tapped a key on his laptop. The screen jumped to a second clip. Now Holt was pacing, the same sidewalk visible in the background. Marcus still sat on the ground, collecting his books one by one, his small hands shaking. Holt pulled his radio to his mouth, speaking quickly, his eyes darting up and down the street. He never looked back at the boy. He never offered a hand. Then, as quickly as he had appeared, Holt turned and walked away, leaving Marcus alone. The room felt like it couldn't breathe. Malcolm faced the judge. "This footage is time-stamped, Your Honor. It aligns precisely with the moment Marcus described under oath." At the defense table, Attorney Gerald Myers stood slowly, his voice calm but razor-sharp. "Your Honor, I request the court immediately reinstate the boy's full testimony and open an official inquiry, not only into Officer Holt's conduct, but into this court's handling of the witness." The prosecutor, who had previously smirked during Marcus's testimony, now stared at the floor. Judge Marks didn't respond right away. His fingers tapped the wooden surface of the bench. Then he cleared his throat. His voice was a far cry from the bark that had cut Marcus off earlier. "Motion granted," he said, barely above a whisper. Malcolm took his seat again. Marcus let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Terrence placed a hand on his son's shoulder just once, firm and proud. The courtroom, still silent, was now watching the judge. Not the boy, not the cop. Him. Court was adjourned moments later, but the aftermath started the moment they stepped outside. On the courthouse steps, reporters swarmed. Microphones stretched like antennae. Cameras clicked nonstop. Malcolm, prepared for this, reached into his briefcase and pulled out a sealed envelope. He handed it directly to a local journalist he knew from a previous case, Rico Alvarez, someone who never looked the other way. Inside the envelope were copies of disciplinary transcripts and court transcripts, 2 past cases where Judge Marks had struck testimony from young black boys. One had been accused of shoplifting without evidence. The other had tried to report an assault by a school officer. Both had been silenced in court. Both had been dismissed with the same language Marcus had faced. Unreliable, uncooperative, disrespectful. By 4 p.m., the story had broken on 3 major news sites. By 6 p.m., it was trending on every screen in Claiborne. Judge Ronald Marks was officially placed under review by the State Judicial Board. His past rulings were being reopened. Officer Holt was suspended without pay pending internal affairs investigation. The Claiborne Police Department issued a carefully worded statement, but it wasn't enough to cool the anger brewing online. That evening, as the courthouse emptied out, Marcus and Terrence stood on the steps together. Reporters stayed back now. They had gotten their story. This was a father and son moment, quiet, away from the frenzy. Terrence knelt beside his son, his voice low. "You didn't just tell the truth," he said. "You made them listen." Marcus looked up at his father. "I was scared." "You still told it," Terrence replied. "That's what makes you strong." Across the street, Malcolm leaned against a lamppost, watching them. His briefcase rested by his feet. He didn't need to say anything. He knew, Justice didn't always come in a rush. Sometimes it came in the form of a boy brave enough to speak, and a man patient enough to help others hear him. And while Claiborne wasn't changed overnight, a crack had formed. A small one, but deep, and that's where light always starts. He didn't need to defend himself. The truth did it for him. If that moment hit you deep, subscribe and stand with what's right. A judge yells at a black boy for speaking out. Then security footage exposes the shocking truth. If you believe every black child deserves a voice, not shame, hit that subscribe button now.